Welcome back to Grandeur History, where we uncover the strange and forgotten sides of history. Tonight we step into ancient Babylon to explore a sacred, intimate ritual so misunderstood that later civilizations tried to erase it entirely. There was one ritual they tried to silence, and it was performed in the name of the divine. Later writers called it corruption. Later empires called it sin, but Babylon called it duty. So why did history decide it was too dangerous to remember? You step onto warm stone beneath a night sky filled with stars. Torches flicker along temple walls. Let the noise of your day drift away. If stories like this help you relax or reflect, you're gently invited to like the video, subscribe to Grandeur History, and turn on notifications. It's the year 1800 BCE. Babylon is alive with prayer, trade, and ritual, and the act that later ages would condemn was once believed to bind humans and gods together. You are 14 years old, stand in the shadow of the greatest city humanity has ever constructed, wearing a linen tunic that costs more than your father earns in a season. A garland of woven date palm leaves and river blossoms is pressed onto your brow, the petals already wilting in the relentless Mesopotamian heat. Your mother's hands tremble as she adjusts the fabric to your shoulder, while your father stands apart, stoic, looking at the towering walls of the Edomani ziggurat with the calculating gaze of a merchant assessing a debt. They tell you that you are about to serve the city, the harvest, and the cosmos itself. But the older women, the ones with lines etched deep in their faces who linger near the outer courtyard, look at you with a hollow pity that chills your blood despite the sun. By nightfall, a complete stranger will determine your value with a toss of silver. This is a reality of the Temple of Ishtar, a sprawling machine of theology and economics so efficient that ancient historians like Herodotus wrote of it with a mixture of awe and revulsion. Let us walk through the blue glazed gates. Her name is Beltane, and this is the story of how a girl becomes a ghost within the walls of the holy city. Imagine the sensory overload as Beltane crosses the threshold of the sacred precinct, a complex that functions less like a church and more like a corporation. The ground beneath her sandals is paved with baked brick, stamped of the seal of the king, reminding every soul that religion and state are one and the same. Around her, the courtyard is a sea of humanity. There are hundreds of other women here, some mere children, others well past their prime, all sitting the dust, all wearing the telltale rope crowns that mark them as offerings to the goddess Midar. The Babylonian aspect of Ishtar, the rule of the land, is absolute and terrifying in its simplicity. Every woman born in Babylon must once in her life sit in the temple of Aphrodite or Ishtar and have intercourse with a stranger. Only then, when the coin is paid and the act is done, is she free to return to her home. Her duty to the god is discharged, but Beltane is not just a passing pilgrim. She has been brought here to stay. The temple priests, men with shaved heads and eyes that miss nothing, move through the crowd like sharks in a shallow pool. A scribe, his fingers stained black with ink, approaches Beltane. He does not ask her name, he asks her father's lineage, verifying a transaction. He presses a stylus into a wet clay tablet, capturing her identity in wedge-shaped cuneo marks. In this moment, Beltane ceases to be a daughter and becomes an asset of the state. She is offered a cup of fermented beer and a cake of crushed barley. She watches the rituals unfolding around her. It is a marketplace of flesh sanctified by hymns. Men wander the rows of waiting women holding silver coins, the price of admission. They scan the faces looking for youth, for beauty, for fear. The rope crown around Belane's head feels heavy, a physical weight binding her to the stone floor. It is a symbol of the divine core that connects the heavens to the earth. But to her, it feels like a leash. The custom dictates that a man must throw the coin into the woman's lap and speak the sacred phrase, "I invite you in the name of Mela." Once those words are spoken and the silver touches her, she cannot refuse. To refuse is to deny the goddess. Beltane watches as a girl nearby, no older than herself, is selected. The coin hits her lap with dull clink. The girl flinches, her eyes darting to her parents who stand at the perimeter, but they only nod. She stands up, her legs shaking, and follows the stranger into the deeper recesses of the temple, behind the heavy woolen curtains that smell of cedar oil and ancient sweat. This is the normalization of trauma. The Babylonians did not see this as abuse. They saw it as the essential engine that kept the universe running. They believed that without these acts the earth would not yield grain, the rivers would not rise, and the city would fall to chaos. It is a terrifying logic, the sacrifice of the individual for survival of the collective. But Belton is not destined for the one-time service described by the Greek travelers. She is being inducted into the Kadisu, the holy ones, the permanent retinue of the temple. Her parents have not just brought her here for a ritual. They have given her to the temple to settle a debt, or perhaps in the hope that she will live a life better fed than the one they can offer. The scribe finishes his tablet. A priest beckons. Beltane leaves the sunlight of the courtyard and steps into the cool, cavernous interior of the ziggurat. The noise of the city fades, replaced by the low rhythmic chanting of the permanent priestesses. Beltane is led to a small chamber stripped of her family's finery and bathed in water from the sacred river. They dress her in clean linen, stiff and white. A woman named Ilani, her face painted with the heavy coal and malachite dust of court, takes charge of her. Itani's voice is soft, but her eyes are hard. Polished stones have seen decades of the sanctity. She teaches Beltane the first lesson to Kadisu. You are a vessel. Your body is a temple. Your desires are relevant. For the first few weeks, Beltane believed a lie. She believes she has been elevated. She eats meat every day. Some of her family rarely did. She sleeps on a raised mat. She learns to play the lyre in the drum. She memorizes the great hymns to Ishtar, the poems that celebrate the goddess of war and love, the goddess who destroys mountains and devours lovers. The priest explained that by serving the desires of men, she is transmuting base lust into divine energy. But the education soon shifts from theology to practicality. Beltane teaches her how to apply the oils that make the skin gleam in the dim lamplight. She teaches her how to lower her eyelids to feign modesty while signaling availability. She teaches her how to recognize the rank of a man by the weave of his cloak and the seal ring on his finger. Beltane realizes that the temple is in truth a massive bank. The storehouses are filled with grain jars, wool, silver ingots, and oil, all payment for the services rendered by the women. She is part of the currency. The clay tablets that record the transactions are meticulous. They list the date, the amount paid, the name of the man, and the name of the priestess. But they never record how the woman felt. They never record the coldness of the stone floor, or the emptiness that follows the act. The administrative precision of the Babylonian bureaucracy turns the most intimate human act into a ledger entry. The illusion of sanctity begins to crack one evening when the outer gates are locked, the casual pilgrims are gone, and only the serious patrons remain. These are the powerful men of Babylon, generals, high merchants, diplomats from Assyria or Elam. They do not come for the quick ritual in the courtyard. They come for the inner chambers, for the Kadisu. Beltane is summoned. She sits on her mat, the robe crown replaced by a beaded headdress. The air is stifling. A man enters, a merchant with a beard oiled and curled in the fashion of the wealthy. He speaks to the priest, not to her. He drops a bag of silver into the priest's hand. The priest weighs it, nods, and gestures to Belt. In that exchange, the theological veil falls away. She sees it clearly. The silver goes to the temple, the grain goes to the silo, and she is merely the mechanism of transfer. She performs her duty. She does not cry. She has learned that tears are an annoyance to clients. When the man leaves, he looks lighter, unburdened, as if he's indeed left his sins and stresses within her body. Belt, however, feels heavier. She goes to the washing basin, scrubbing her skin until it's red, but the feeling of being owned does not wash off. Years blur into a routine of bells and incense. Beltane watches the other women. Some, like Otani, have hardened into statues, finding power in their position, commanding respect from the younger girls and even the junior priests. They wear their status like armor. Others fade away. They stop eating. They stare at the walls, and eventually they disappear. When Belton asks where a missing girl is gone, the answer is always vague. She has returned to the goddess. But Belton knows the truth. The temple has no use for broken vessels. They are cast out into the streets or sent to work in the textile mills. Their holy status revoked the moment their beauty or their sanity fractures. The fear of that expulsion keeps Belt and Nee compliant. She masters the art of detachment. She learns to separate her mind from her body. When she is with a patron, she thinks of the river, of the reeds swaying the wind, of the way the light hits the ziggurat at dawn. She creates a sanctuary inside her own skull, the only place the temple cannot unlock. For the Katus, it is the busiest season. The demand for goddess's favor is at its peak. Beltane is now older, an experienced priestess. She has chosen to assist in the preparations for the sacred marriage, the Hieros Gamos. It is a ceremony of immense power and danger. If the ritual fails, the crops will wither. Belt carries the bowl of golden oil to the uppermost chamber of the ziggurat, a room she has never entered before. The view from the window shows the city spreading out like a map of humanity, small and insignificant. She sees the high priestess, a woman she has worshipped from afar, sitting on the great bed. But up close, Belton sees a trembling in the high priestess's hands. She sees the terror in the eyes of the most powerful woman in Babylon. The high priestess is just as trapped by the expectations of the gods and the state as the girl in the courtyard with the rope crown. The king enters, or perhaps it is a commoner chosen to be king for a day who will be sacrificed later. History is murky on the specific year's custom, but the weight of the moment crushes the breath out of the room. Belani pours the oil. She retreats into the shadows. She witnesses a union, a state in faith, and she realizes is a performance. A desperate, terrified performance by people hoping to control the uncontrollable forces of nature. The years continue to grind forward. The clay tablets with Beltane's name pile up in the archives. Thousands of transactions, thousands of silver shekels. She has generated a fortune for the temple. She has secured the harvest according to the priests, but her own harvest is barren. Cadis, who are often forbidden to marry or raise their own families. Their fertility belongs to Babylon, not to themselves. Beltane finds grey in her hair. She sees the younger girls arriving terrified and fresh, just as she was in 1792 BC. She sees a cycle repeating, an endless wheel of consumption. She tries to warn a new girl to tell her guard her heart, but the girl looks at Belton with that same mix of pity and fear that Beltane once had for the older women. She realizes she's become the ghost she feared. One day the scribe does not call her name. There is no dramatic dismissal, no ceremony, simply silence. Her rations are reduced. Her sleeping mat is moved to the periphery of the dormitory. The message is clear. Her season is ending. The temple is efficient. It does not waste resources on assets that no longer yield a return. What happens to a holy woman when she is no longer holy? The historical record is heartbreakingly silent. The Kenya-form tablets record the intake of grain and the output of wool, but they do not record the retirement plans of priestesses. Most likely, Belton faces a choice: begging the streets where she was once revered, or take on the lowest tasks of the temple complex, scrubbing floors, grinding barley, weaving until her fingers bleed. She chooses a ladder. She chooses to stay within the walls because the world outside has become a stranger to her. She becomes invisible. She watches the rituals from the shadows, a spectral figure haunting the edges of the ecstasy she once facilitated. She dies in the temple infirmary, perhaps of a fever, perhaps of simple exhaustion. Her body is wrapped in a simple reed mat, not the fine linen of Kadisu. There is no silver coin placed in her mouth. She is given enough silver. She is buried in the common plot outside the city walls, her grave unmarked. The story of Belton is the story of thousands of women whose lives were metabolized by the great civilizations of antiquity. We look at the ruins of Babylon, at the majestic Ishtar gate in museums, and we see the glory of blue tiles and golden lions. The writers of the time, the men who pressed the stylus into the clay, had no interest in preserving Beltane's internal life, but by piecing together the fragments, the laws of Hammurabi, the accounting records of the temples, and the scandalized reports of Greek tourists, we can reconstruct the silhouette of her pain. We can see that the sacred marriage and the temple prostitution were elevated terms for a system that industrialized the bodies of women for the profit of the state. The lamps are dim now. The chanting has faded. Somewhere warm stone still holds the day's heat. Incense lingers in the air. You can almost hear it, sand shifting outside the walls, a distant river moving slowly, footsteps that no longer echo. If this journey stayed with you, if these forgotten echoes helped you rest, you're softly invited to like the video, to share it with another night listener, to subscribe to Grandeur History when it feels right. For now, let Babylon rest. Goodbye, and we will meet again.